am so pleased to introduce our three esteemed and savvy panelists. First, Gabrielle Hartley is a divorce lawyer and mediator with over 25 years in practice. Her 2019 book, Better Apart, The Radically Positive Way to Separate, was released with a glowing cover endorsement from Gwyneth Paltrow. Better Apart is also a program for divorce professionals to help their clients close their cases as efficiently as possible. Gabrielle practices in New York and Massachusetts and has a fully operational online mediation practice. Susan Guthrie is a top family law attorney and mediator. And as one of the leading experts in the world in online mediation, she is also the founder of Learn to Mediate Online, which provides webinars and training for professionals. Susan is on the executive council of the Dispute Resolution Section and is the membership officer and co-chair of the Mediation Committee. And finally, Laura Wasser is a family law expert. She is the managing partner at the law firm Wasser, Cooperman, and Mandels, and the founder and CEO of the online divorce platform, It's Over Easy. In 2013, she authored the New York Times bestseller, It Doesn't Have to Be That Way, How to Divorce Without Destroying Your Family or Bankrupting Yourself, published by St. Martin's Press. She also hosts the All's Fair with Laura Wasser podcast on iHeartRadio. So without further ado, let's get this started.
Thanks, Mary. So let me share my screen and we're going to flip over to here we go. So let's here we go. You've heard about us, so we're actually going to move along to why side gigs. So Laura, maybe you want to explain why we even chose to talk about this topic.
Well, as you've just heard, all three of us work in the family law space. And I say to people, civilians often, that family law is sometimes a euphemism for divorce law. And one of the things that I've always been interested in as a family law practitioner is changing the narrative, changing the way we approach divorce and how we look at it, making it not as negative of an experience for families and particularly children. It occurred to me years ago that this is still a very antiquated way of practicing. So side gigs, like the ones that all of us participate in, are things that really help change the narrative, help people learn, educate them how things can be different and making change. Also, I feel like amplifying our message is helpful because unless you're getting divorced, you're not necessarily going to call a divorce attorney. And so many people come to my office and say, I've never done this before. Well, of course you haven't done it before. But if what families go through, and if you think about the statistics, everybody knows somebody who's been divorced or has been divorced themselves. If you think about how our country particularly works, it would make sense to amplify the experience and understand when you're coming to it, perhaps even as you're walking down the aisle and getting married. I think that's really important.
And if you feel like in your particular fields, because I know many of you may not be family lawyers, you can really amplify your presence and get more exposure, not just for yourself, but to convey the messages that you want to spread farther and wider. And when you amplify your message, then more people will learn from what you have to say and hopefully spread it further, like the Fabergé Nature's Organic commercial, and she told two friends, and so on and so on, something like that. So, we really want to focus on, we can call it building your brand, but it's really about creating a message that's lasting and that you feel like is valuable and important. And that will really be something that the people who subscribe to whatever you create or buy your book or whatever you decide to do will have so much ability to learn from.
Yeah, and today, as we all sit here in COVID and we're facing some I love this word unprecedented that we keep hearing all the time, but there are a couple of other advantages that may play into your thinking. One thing is you can earn money from these side gigs. In fact, some of them can build a fairly significant revenue stream depending on how you approach it. And the other thing, again, under COVID, as we are all experiencing, as we're putting out our shows and our podcasts and all, they really can be done from almost anywhere. Laura usually does her podcasts in a studio. She's doing them at home. I've always done mine at home. You can write at home. So you have great flexibility in where you're going to do these. And I think we all agreed when we were creating this program, being divorce attorneys is not necessarily the most fun in the world, but these side gigs there's something really compelling about getting your message out, spreading the word, sharing your expertise, and having a little fun.
Also, Gabrielle was saying earlier before we went live, it is really nice when we get feedback and somebody writes a letter and says, thanks so much for doing this, or you've really helped me. Getting to the podcast, I was actually, before this all started, in early March on a plane, and somebody came up to me and said, I listened to your podcast. It's helped me so much. Thank you so much. That makes us feel good. I mean, we love that. And you don't often see that, particularly family law practitioners don't often get a lot of love. Clients are going through a miserable time. The best we can hope for is we see them a few years later in a restaurant. They're like,
we've all been there.
Exactly right. And it's so amazing to get a letter or someone to come over to you and thank you, or, anyway, it's incredibly rewarding. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Laura.
No. So podcasting, we all have podcasts. Oh, actually, we've all been on podcasts. Susan and I have podcasts. My podcast experience is a little bit different from Susan's. We started at a company called Podcast One. Johnny, who's a head of content at It's Over Easy, and my wonderful producer. And at the time, that podcast was called Divorce Sucks. Earlier this year, we kind of opened up our subject matter a little bit more. We were offered a deal with iHeartRadio, which was amazing. And so we moved, and we've been having a ton of fun, really talking about all kinds of relationships and how they work. We obviously still have a lot of divorce professionals on, but a lot of therapists and celebrities to talk about their relationship experiences. So yeah, it really is a lot of fun. We do it once a week. When COVID started, iHeart was nice enough to bring over all of the equipment, and I can sit here and do it in my living room, and we've been completely on schedule. One thing I know some of you are going to ask about is, how does this make money? In both of the deals that we've had, without getting too explicit, how it works is you make money on podcasts by other people buying advertisements or sponsorships on your podcast. And the more downloads you get, the more people are interested in advertising on your podcast. So you either do your read-ons as the podcast host, or they'll just put another one and drop it into the middle of your episode. And generally, there's some kind of a rev share on that between you on the podcast owner or host, and the company that is promoting it, in my case, iHeart. So that's an answer to a question. They don't usually pay you, but they do the rev share.
And I did not have a podcast, but when Better Apart came out, I was very quickly on dozens and dozens of podcasts. And what that does for you, in addition to obviously promotion of your book or your program or your practice, if you are trying to elevate the presence of your website, you can often get backlinks to your website, which will raise your rating in how high you come up in Google, which is always really important. So there's a lot of different ways to use podcasts. And also, quite frankly, I have Divorce Talk and More, a YouTube channel, which also is very helpful to get quick ideas and thoughts out to people who are interested in whatever it is that you have to talk about. Not people you have to talk about, subject matters that people want to hear about. And it's really easy to do. You can do it from your office. You can do it from your living room. And it's also very helpful for navigation on your Google Analytics.
Yeah, and two other things that can be helpful about having a podcast. I have two podcasts. Like Laura, I started with a different one. I had Breaking Free, a Modern Divorce podcast. And then toward the end of last year, moved over to the Divorce and Beyond podcast because the messaging worked better for me. But for professionals, for those of you who are out there thinking there's effort that goes into this, why would I want to do this? Know this, a lot of my divorce mediation clients came to me through listening to my podcast. And in fact, that was one of the largest drivers for leads for clients. And then just recently, with everything that's been happening and with the surge in online mediation, I decided to start the Learn to Mediate Online podcast, which stems from my training programs, because I'm getting so much information in the world of online mediation as it's changing so quickly. I started that one in order to be able to just communicate with my trainees and with all the people out there in the world who are facing this new world of online mediation. And I want to get that information out quickly. And I can tell you, I turned that podcast around I started it in about 4 days. Just to pull everything together, get it signed up on iTunes and all that. So it's a great way that you can hone in on specific things that are going to help you in your practice as well. Let me just
not everybody's as quick as Susan though, so it might take 2 weeks. I'm just saying, she's got extra skills.
So we've gone over some of these items on why you might want to start a podcast. But, Laura, we were talking when we set this up about the networking and the connection are real positives.
Yeah. And again, I've had so many people that are either featured on the It's Over Easy Index or people that I've worked with at my practice at the firm that have said, like, can I be on your podcast? I've got a story to tell. I'd like to tell it. As Gabrielle said, I do a lot of other people's podcasts, sometimes because I'm asked and sometimes because iHeart hooks me up with them because they like to do, some cross-pollination. But you get to meet really interesting people. You get to get your message out there. Again, this is being on somebody else's podcast. And having people on yours, you really can, as Susan said, focus and hone in on whatever the issue of the moment is. I've done probably 20 in the past 2.5 months just about COVID and what it's like to be quarantined with somebody, or how to share custody if you've got custody orders in place, but you're feeling like the other person isn't being as meticulous as you are about keeping things safe or social distancing. Support orders people want to change. All of these things, you can speak to a large audience of people in one fell swoop, and they live most of the time for a long period of time, if not forever, online for download. So you can direct people there as well.
And the other thing that it's not, if you're not up for a podcast for any set of reasons, hosting an online blog on your site also provides some of that. I've had so many people now who heard me on podcasts or knew of me reaching out to me to write a blog, and that also elevates your presence within whatever your area of expertise is.
And a couple other just quick points on why doing a podcast. It really does. It is easy. It does have a learning curve like anything else. And we're going to talk just in a minute a little bit about what it takes to pull one together. But it does in another way allow you, the continuity point was something I discounted when I started doing it. But, and I bet Laura, you get this, and Gab with your different ways and the podcasts that you've been on. You create an ongoing touch point with your audience. They feel like they start to get to know you. And in fact, when I do then talk to someone, you get this like, oh my gosh, I remember when you said this. And it's almost like they know you, they feel like a friend. They feel like they can approach you. They'll come up to you in an airport, like Laura just said. I get that quite often from people, and they feel that they're able to be a part of your world, of your message, of what is happening. So that can be very significant for people. So talking about 5 steps to launch. Now, as we mentioned just in the beginning, Laura has had a different approach, and there are a few different ways to get your own podcast started. I would be more in the do-it-yourself realm, and Laura, as she mentioned, had a podcast producer first with Podcast One and now with iHeartRadio. So, Laura, from that perspective, how did you get started with your first when you started Divorce Sucks?
They called me. They knew that I was, a well-known divorce attorney. I think with a lot of stuff that I do, the angle probably was more of a celebrity thing, which I said I'm not really interested in doing. I don't like to talk about my celebrity clients. I'm not nearly as interested in like the world of celebrity as a lot of people are. But I think I was able to prevail upon them that there is something else interesting to be spoken about when you're discussing people's experiences going through divorce. And so a lot of the stuff on this 5 steps to launch list for me was taken care of, and we got really lucky about it. But there were certain things like the branding and all that we had to be concerned about, because I already have kind of a brand, if you will. So again, Johnny, who's our head of content at It's Over Easy, has always been very on top of that. And so we collaborated with, at the time, Podcast One, and now with iHeart in terms of what we wanted to be called, what we wanted the logo to look like, all of that stuff. And they really were great about helping us do it.
Yeah, and that's, the steps I think are the same. I think the difference here would only be whether you're doing it yourself or with there are companies that you can hire or individuals that you can hire to start your podcast for you. My first one, we hired a podcast producer to help us get up and running, to learn some of the behind the scenes stuff. The second 2 that I did, the ones that are current right now, I did myself, because once you actually start doing it, the learning curve, though it takes a little time, once you've done it a few times, you can whip out a podcast episode pretty darn quickly. And these are, we're not going to go through every single one of these steps, but these are the basic steps you would go through in creating your podcast. And the only thing I would say about creating a podcast is really start with number 1, because the world of podcasting, even in the 2 years I've been doing it, and Laura, I think you're in that same range of time, it has exploded. When I started, Laura's Divorce Sucks and maybe 10 other divorce podcasts were out there. Now there must be hundreds of them. So, thankfully people are still listening to ours, so we're happy about that. But you do want to be sure to have a really honed in topic. But it's not always that you're going for this huge, broad audience. Sometimes you're really just speaking to your audience. As with like the Learn to Mediate Online podcast, I don't know how broad the audience is for online mediation and topics around that, but thankfully people are listening, and it was a wonderful way to get the message out. So Go ahead, Gab.
I was just going to say, always remember narrow and deep is a really great way to go if you're going to do something like this. Narrow and deep, and then you can, mushroom from there.
Yeah.
Also, to the extent you can, if you're thinking about getting into this, and I know I hear a lot, everybody has a podcast. Sticking with it for a certain period of time becomes the hard part. Finding new guests, finding new topics. The first, I'd say 6 are tough. And then after that, you're like Howard Stern every week, and it's fine. And then after that, it gets kind of like, okay, what's our new content? What are we going to be talking about? But if you are thinking about doing it, if you can, send out some emails or make some connections and be on a few other ones as a guest. If there's something you're interested in and you want to go, for example, I speak a lot about divorce. People will have me on their podcast to speak about divorce. Then I have my own podcast that's only about divorce, but I've been on Dr. Drew's podcast talking about the psychological ramifications of divorce and also some of the physical ones. I've been on Sex with Emily talking about how sexual, issues affect people pre and post divorce, all of those things. Then you've got some practice under your belt. You kind of know how the gig works. And when you go back to set up your own podcast, I think it'll be easier because you won't be such a novice.
Yeah, really good points. And just quickly to say, in the slide deck, on the very last page of the slide deck, when you get it, we do have a list of some resources to get you started in any of these 3 topics that we're talking about. So like Podbean, Libsyn, iHeartRadio, Anchor, those are platforms for your podcast. We have the information about those at the end of the slide deck. But our next topic would be publishing. And this is something I think everybody has a book in them. Somebody told me that the other day. We've all gotten started down that road. Definitely Laura and Gabrielle have really, really hit the world of publishing. But why don't we start with you, Laura?
It feels so long ago, I barely remember it. My book was published in 2013. Again, I was approached by a book agent. This is like probably another thing that really has changed is back then there were Kindles and online reading devices, but people actually really did still buy books. The publishing industry I know has changed quite a bit since 2012, 2013. But they approached me and then we shopped it around. I got to go to New York and go to we went to Penguin, and it was very cool. They got into a bidding war. There was an advance paid. And then I had to write the book, and which I did. And it was a topic that was near and dear to me. At the time, I had been practicing probably for 15, 18 years. And I really, because our firm has always represented high net worth individuals, I spent a lot of time speaking with friends and peers that could never afford our hourly rates about what they could do differently as they approach divorce. And I had so many people, both clients and friends, say, if I only knew then what I know now. So I figured I'd write that book and talk about the message that I am constantly trying to get through, which is there needs to be a change in the way we approach divorce. At It's Over Easy, we call it the evolution of dissolution, and we embody that in everything. This book, I do have clients come to me and say, I read your book. I want to do it the way you talk about it in your book. Can you help us? And I've also had people say, I could never afford your firm, but your book really helped me. So it felt good. It was a passion project, and it did lead to a jumping off point for so many other things, like the All's Fair podcast and like It's Over Easy. I had a really good time doing it. I don't know if I would do it again, but I did enjoy it when it happened. It was like a bucket list type of a thing.
Well, I have to second, Better Part was totally a bucket list for me. Without my whole backstory, quick backstory, my parents divorced really well. I did not realize how fortunate I was until I clerked in New York City for a judge where I resolved probably nearly 1,000 trial-ready insane cases. And I realized how horrible the process is for so many people, how things spin out of control so quickly. And I had a very strong mindfulness and yoga practice, and I wanted to bring mindfulness and yoga into a process that people can use to navigate themselves through divorce so that they have tools that they can sort of rev down and keep calm no matter how crazy their divorce is getting. And so I was so focused on writing this book, and I wanted it to be read far and wide. I kept saying, I don't want to write a dusty book on a shelf. I really want to help as many people as possible. And it was a whole process because, I'm not a celebrity lawyer. I'm a regular divorce lawyer and mediator. And I had to, I really wanted to have a conventional publisher, and I did go with HarperCollins, and but I had to get an agent, and it's like a whole process. You have to write a proposal and shop it around, and I got plenty of letters of rejection. But then finally, somebody didn't look at me and say, what does yoga have to do with divorce? And that was a beautiful day for me, and it was really fun. It continues to be fun. Publishing is a really incredible way to launch your message forward. I will have to warn you that getting the book written is literally step -1. There's a lot more work ahead, but it's all been so much fun. And I don't know if I write another book. Maybe I will, maybe I won't, but I wouldn't trade the experience for anything. And I really encourage anyone who's got something in them to say, who's passionate about it. Follow your passion and get organized, and just be ready for the ride that it is, because it's definitely, you need to be very tenacious in getting your message out, and we'll talk about that more later in later slides.
Yeah. Well, and I think you both had a very different path. I actually did not write an entire book. I was asked to contribute a chapter. So Divorce Insights is called Conversations with America's Leading Divorce Professionals, and they approached me, but it was an easy yes, right? Because I could write a chapter. I got to write it on my favorite topic, which was inserting mindfulness into mediation and helping couples through divorce in that fashion. But it led to some major benefits, and we'll talk some of those benefits. So there are a lot of different ways that you can approach publishing. There's also articles, as many of you know, and getting into other publications that you can also be published in a lot of different ways. Books are definitely one good way to go, but let's talk about some of the reasons, behind why write a book, because you've heard definitely because you have something to say, but there are some other benefits to look for if you're contemplating, or if that's like Laura and Gab, if that's something that's on your bucket list.
Oh, is that one mine?
Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
Sorry. Yeah, it might be on mine as well. Sorry, I just lost and again, it's not the only reason, but once you get past I have something to say and I have a message to deliver, it is a really good excuse for a book party. We had one in New York City. We had one here in Los Angeles. It was a blast. Stevie Wonder came, Brian Grazer came. It was very, very cool, and it had a lot of buzz. And it was a good reward for all the work that went into writing the book and all the hard work that went into the years of establishing the knowledge that I needed to have to be able to write the book. And I'm sure both of you feel that way too. At the end of the whole thing, isn't it good to just party? Yeah, totally. And I did not have any celebs at my book party, but I also had several amazing book parties. And, in addition to just the party, it was also cool to have, yet another set of people who you're sort of spreading the message with, and, spreading joy. Being a lawyer of any kind isn't necessarily always coupled with the idea of spreading joy. So.
Yeah, and there are a few other things that I have found having the book, even with my role just being contributing a chapter, but it's also a very tangible business card when you go to functions. If you're speaking at a conference and you can pass out copies of you've got them around and you can pass them out to people, it's a little bit more memorable than a little piece of paper card. And I would say that it's also something that has a little more visibility because, author will always be after your name. You get a page on Amazon's author pages. You have an author page, which can highlight and feature other things that you do. So it's a way to, with a little bit of effort on your part, actually get some larger marketing exposure.
Yeah, it was pretty exciting when I realized, my bio was actually on the HarperCollins page. I was like, oh my gosh, it's really on the, it was pretty exciting. And it also does allow you, if you're not going to have a podcast, or have something, people want to talk to you if you've written a book. It's almost like a stamp of credibility. So. Oh,
that's a great point. Yeah. Once you've got a book, you must have something to say.
Exactly.
So you two ladies did go the traditional route, and there are definitely some benefits to that. So if you want to cover those.
Yeah, it made it very easy. The benefits are that you don't have to do much of anything other than write the book. They pick out the artwork for you. They do the editing for you. You have a lot of work to do after the book comes out, but actually bringing the book to the distributors and getting it in all the bookstores and online, they just take care of everything. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, that was the easy part. I had some frustrations with my editor a few times, only because I think she didn't get it. And so, but again, we talked them through, we got it done. They even had a PR person that they assigned me when the book came out to kind of do the marketing and the public relations. So it is, if you can get in that door, and again, I doubt that I even could in 2020 because things have changed so much in the publishing industry. But that's definitely a way to do it that takes a lot of the pressure off of the author, him or herself.
Yeah, and I would say, I was also assigned a publishing, a promotion person. The person who I was assigned, which I think happens to a lot of authors, is, they're a little younger and they often are not as tenacious as you or I may be. So that's why I found that I wound up doing a lot of the follow-up, but they had at least sent the book to various places. So then, it wasn't like I was cold calling. There was at least the hello made for me. So that was nice.
Well, and then I would call what I did one of the alternative routes to publishing, which is sort of the middle man, where somebody approached me, but I was only doing that one chapter. But these days, and I think Laura alluded to this, publishing has really changed, and self-publishing has become a really popular option. And one of the things, I know I don't want to give secrets away, Gab, but you've said you might like to self-publish your next book if you do one, because of some of the benefits. Pardon?
Yeah. No, because when you're with a publisher, you don't have control about a lot of things. Like, I wish my book right now were in paperback. It would be a lot more affordable, but they did a very large printing of the hardcover, and then they did a second printing of the hardcover, and hardcover is expensive and not everybody wants to read it on Kindle. And I've got no control over that whatsoever. Or like Amazon, if you publish through Amazon, my understanding is you have control about how it goes out. There was a time where Amazon would only allow one copy of my book to be ordered by any person within certain regions. I'm sure, Susan, you remember.
I do remember. I couldn't get your book.
If I want to send a copy of my book to somebody, I actually have a box of books and I have to go to the post office, unless I buy it on Barnes & Noble. But it's a little bit more cumbersome when you go with a traditional publisher, because their systems are not necessarily aligned with the modern way. And when I say modern, I mean like the last 3 to 5 years of doing things. So I think that there's definitely pros and cons. I am very grateful that I had the opportunity to get published by a big publisher. But if you don't, the other thing is it takes a long time. My book was done probably about 2 years before it hit the shelves. Ooh. So if you're in a rush, definitely don't go the big publishing route. I don't know if Laura had a similar experience, but her route is maybe a little different than, the regular person.
Yeah, they were rushing me. I was like, I'm trying, but I got kids but yeah, I didn't have that experience, and I didn't have the Amazon experience either. That's terrible.
It was terrible. They
just wanted to be nice and bought like 100 copies. And I was like, that's probably why I was the New York Times bestseller. Just all my friends bought it. But yeah, that's very frustrating. That definitely would make me lean towards the self-publishing. And again, as Gabrielle said, so much has changed.
Yeah, there are actually, services now out there, or people or programs that you can get into that basically will walk you through the self-publication process. And you can do that at various levels. You can do it where you are doing most of the work yourself, and they're going to go get your ISDN number and get you listed on Amazon and help you get that loaded, all the way up to, pretty much where they do everything for you other than the writing, but they're not putting it out like the big publishing houses are doing. So these days, I think Laura's 100% right. There are so many different ways to get something out, and many people that I know, well-established authors, are turning to self-publication because of that control issue and the money issue. I have to say, when you self-publish, the money is for the most part your money. Whereas when you publish through a large publishing house, depending on the deal you make, you may not be you may sell a ton of books, but if you're not getting a big percentage of the book sales, it doesn't always add up to a large amount of money.
You may get you may get, I got a reasonable advance. You may get an advance, and you're certainly not going to get an advance when you're self-publishing. And also,
No.
I was able to do some pretty fun book talks at Barnes and Noble, and they had the book cover and my picture and 100 people there to hear me on, a couple of occasions. And that was really fun. And I'm not sure that I could have pulled that off had I self-published. But anyway, there's definitely pros and cons of each. And, the process is a little bit different. If you have, if you have sort of an inclination of one or the other, you could always reach out to any of us and we could tell you more about our experiences.
Yeah. And then, really, I think the area where most people are asking me, well, podcasts are pretty interesting to people. I get asked about those a lot, but definitely putting out programs right now. It does seem like more and more people are getting into the programming space. And I think it's interesting. We all of us have our own programs going. And this is a place where, again, there are a lot of benefits. And these have maybe some of the bigger benefits that maybe you all haven't thought of. So Laura, you recently put out Next Chapter, right?
Yes, the Next Chapter series was, I always knew, but it became more apparent again through It's Over Easy and our blog and the people who have gone through our platform that it's not over when it's over. So we came up with Next Chapter, and we had a bunch of the people to whom I refer and who have worked with us in the past, both on health and wellness physically. We have a Pilates fitness instructor. We've got a couple of MFTs, counselors. We have a meditation specialist. We had a couple of financial specialists. One woman who specializes completely in fixing your credit and establishing it anew. One guy who helps with budgeting, particularly for newly divorced people. A dating person, a person who helped with organization, whether that be your closet, your kitchen, or your inbox. All of the things that when you start your next chapter and embark upon life after divorce, you could use a little bit of assistance with. So we created the Next Chapter Life After Divorce series, and it's up and it lives forever. And that, I think, has been helpful to a lot of people. You can sell it singly. You can sell it as part of a platform, which we do with It's Over Easy. And again, it's another way of getting that message out and helping people maybe beyond what you do in your practice.
Right, exactly. And, one thing that frustrated me throughout the time I was litigating and practicing is how many divorce cases get really blown up when they don't need to be. And I feel like, I always say I'm really bad at a lot of things, but I'm really good at settling very complicated divorces. And I created this program, which is actually a divorce coaching certification, but it's also for mediators, dispute resolution professionals, et cetera, which, I broke down what I did so that other people can do that and they can help their clients close their cases more efficiently. So that's something that you might think about, like create something where you're bringing your expertise that you think you can help other people do. And then I also have a program which is for the end user, which gives them all the tools that the book would hand you in a different format with videos, and then they get homework assignments in their emails, and it will help them to navigate the divorce process in a more smooth way. So, these, of course, they're all divorce related, or Laura's and mine are divorce related, but you can do this sort of thing in any area of the law, whoever you're working with. And what's also nice about it is, especially the one for the end user, people can't necessarily afford to talk to me for multiple hours and go through the coaching process with me. But this, they pay once, sometimes they get a free half hour with me that comes with the package, depending on, what's going on at the particular time. But it makes my work more accessible for a much broader array of people. And so that is something that I think it's valuable for a variety of reasons. And you can also earn some side income from that potentially.
Yeah, and my program was never anything I had considered doing. Mine is all to professionals, and many of you in the ABA probably know, certainly in the DR section, because I've been doing so many trainings lately. But the programs actually started a couple of years ago, and all of the programs that I do through Learn to Mediate Online have just resulted from so many people asking me questions about how I did things. And I suspect a lot of you out there who are professionals have that same situation, and it's never been a light bulb that went off saying, hey, maybe I can share what I've learned how to do or what I've created with my colleagues or with other professionals out there. So, that's where the Learn to Mediate Online came from, but that's the social media program. That's the do your own website program. And, I get asked so often about how to start a podcast. That's where the how to start your podcast program has come from, because taking the knowledge that you already have, that you've put into your into all of your efforts to move your practice along, how to build a practice, how to become a mediator in this particular field or an arbitrator. There's a lot of different things that we all don't even realize that we know that can be turned into very successful programs and be helpful to our colleagues or to the public, or to the end user client that we're trying to reach. So it's really something that I never anticipated getting into, and I don't know that any of us did, but it's turned out to be something that's really rewarding. It's also really fun to just be putting something out there that helps people. I get, my inbox gets flooded with people who took it and they're like so happy. And that's it. Just, it's a great way to continue passing on your message, passing on your knowledge. There are a few different ways to do the programs, and we've done them between the three of us in all these three different ways. Gabrielle and I both have live in-person programs, and we do webinar programs. Gab, what do you think some of the better benefits of doing the live in-person and or webinar are?
So, when I'm training people in the Better Part method, I actually think it's better to do live in terms of the value that they get. And I have found that, when I do it live over a longer period of time, those are the people who really get deeper involved and they want to do more of it. Whereas, like for this month, I'm doing a one and done because there's another set of people who want just a taste. And that's nice too. It's a little less expensive and it's a little bit faster, but I really like the deep dive that you can do in a live program. That said, in the webinar format, you can deliver to a lot more people and you can make it a lot more affordable. So it's really like I'd say that you sort of have to decide which is more important and which people want more. It's always a balance. And then just go with it and be ready to, shift and keep working with it until you hit the right delivery option.
Yeah, I think, for me, I started with webinars, as many of you probably know, and I've been doing the webinars over and over again. And it's actually been really helpful to me. I see the line on here that says prepare for the big game. I really found that doing the live webinars, you get an incredible amount of feedback from people, which then allows you to make the program better and better. So I would say, even just in the past 2 months of doing my live webinars, the program has evolved from there. And now as I'm getting ready to upload it into a downloadable program, it's a different program than the one I started out with. So even if you're looking to go to a downloadable program, you may even just want to start with either live in-person or live webinar programs because they give you that ability to really hone your actual program and get that feedback, get the connection. One of the things I know even now, right now, while we're doing a webinar, it's harder to do these things where you don't have connection with people. We don't see any of you and you're not able to connect. So I also love live in-person events. Yeah.
Also, I'm sorry. Like the other thing is like, sometimes I'll invite somebody on who's not really taking the course, but I want more feedback. Like when I was in development, and I'll even ask people who I know are like very sort of high maintenance and picky, because I know they're going to have criticisms, even if it's like just fine, right? But that's good, because you can learn from those criticisms and make it better. And like the better the product you're delivering, I think the better outcome you're going to have. And especially if you have a message that you want to spread, the more clear the message is going to be and the wider it's going to spread. So I think when you're starting, it's probably a good idea, depending on what the content is, to offer it live if your content lends itself for that. It may be a little different for Laura's program, which is, sort of giving straight up content on different topics, that people are listening to almost like a podcast, but like a video podcast. It's a little bit different. Whereas I and Susan, we're each teaching people how to practice their craft a little bit differently. And, the more experiential, the more it's going to stick with the audience.
Yeah, well, and I would, Laura, these are all your experts, you said, right? These are people you usually refer to. So you probably already had the experience of the information that they were going to be able to give to people and knew what their content was. So it was ready to go to downloadable right away.
I mean, we do through It's Over Easy, and then I've also been invited to participate in other ones like this one. We do, more panels and more kind of spur of the moment. What do you think? Here's our advice. I too really enjoy the audience connection. Because we had done so many of the live ones and the questions that I got that I probably was not at all qualified to answer if they had to do with mental health, certainly if they had to do with physical health, and also if they had to do with financial things. So that was how we were able to call the experts that we did use for our Next Chapter series. We got an idea what people were really interested in.
And I love this second point, which is change the world and make an impact on a larger scale. I know I'm like a one-trick pony with changing the world, but, like Laura doing her programs and me doing my programs, and then like any of you who create your programs, or you do our programs, and you get more ideas that, we can actually change the narrative of whatever we're trying to change. Like I call it the positive divorce movement. And I think Laura said she calls it the evolution of dissolution. So it's like changing the world and making an impact on a larger scale is really important. And because we can start to make things less like the old way of looking at things. We can modernize things, like what Susan has done through her program, is she has simplified and broken down the whole way of delivering content online. Now, Zoom always existed, but like how many people would have been up and running as quickly as they have? So she solved a problem, and she also helped so many people by debunking the fear factor, which I think is amazing. And this idea of creating a community of like-minded individuals is also wonderful. Like anyone who does my Professional Better Apart program is then invited to a professional Facebook page where other people, they can meet other professionals who are maybe, certified financial divorce planners or therapists or whatever, a whole variety of people, and they can communicate with each other, learn from each other. And then, even people, might connect with each other and create more products that help more of a large audience.
Yeah, well, one thing that struck me about something Laura said is, with It's Over Easy and the evolution of dissolution, specific to the divorce world, Laura started It's Over Easy, and I'm just going to paraphrase, but to change how divorce happens for people. And her program takes that to another. Now it's changing how after divorce happens for people. So it's a continuation of the message. It's a continuation of the evolution. And really the world we live in today, especially right now in COVID, everything's online. The world is moving online. And I think what we are going to find when we come out of COVID, whenever that might be, we are going to have a new normal. And it's going to include these formats. Things like It's Over Easy. Right now, it's probably one of the only games out there for people who want to start moving through a divorce. But then how do they then access help after their divorce? Through a program. And, you know, I think that many professionals in all different arenas, all again, have that ability to take their knowledge and put it out there in a way that is going to significantly help others, whether, and we all want to do that. So it's whether you want to help in your profession, is it to other business people? Is it to the end user that you've been helping all along? These are an easy way for you to then be able to put your information out, put your message out, and continue your mission, whatever that might be. You know, and then the other one, I to go back to being a little mercenary, but when you have an evergreen or downloadable program, once you've done the work to create it and you've uploaded it and gotten it out there, every time someone downloads it, it's an evergreen source of income for you. It's passive income. And so unlike doing a webinar over and over and over again with essentially the same content, if you record that, upload it into the module format or whatever format you might want to, and then people can download it and have the benefits of being able to access it anytime that they want, you also have a benefit in that there's an income stream without additional effort on your part, except for marketing and getting people to know about it.
There, yeah, except for marketing, that's a whole other topic for all of these programs. But the other thing is, if you decide to upload a program, I'm not sure if it's on this slide, or on the end slide, but there are a bunch of different teaching platforms that are really good. There's Kajabi, there's Podia, there's Teachable. I don't know what other ones that people.
I did include them on the resource slide. So there's a number of platforms where if you have the recording and you have the materials, they make it very easy for you to upload them and put them out there into a format that is easy for people to download, pay for, access additional resources of yours. They even create a web page for you and essentially an online store. So I have a list of all of those on that resource page, you know, that would also just make it easy for you to check some of these things out. But the marketing piece, I do think, is an important piece. And we didn't originally have this as a part of the program of this program, but social media is such an integral part of doing side gigs that, you know, Laura suggested it and we agreed. It needed to be included. And there is a way for some people to actually make money from social media. Maybe not all of us, but you know, Laura, why did you think social media was so important to include in this discussion?
Well, I think that so many of us as practitioners, I mean, at least when I'm practitionering, I tell people, stay off social media.
Totally.
You broadcast what you're doing every minute, stay off, stay off, stay off. And I had always really, really shied away from it. To this day, I still don't know how to use Twitter very well, if at all. I'm not on Facebook personally, although it's over easy is. And my Instagram account is probably a little over a year old only, my personal one. I do think it's important because I do think, again, just like in olden days, nobody was getting on Zoom hearings. Now we all are. The world is changing. I think legal tech is going to really, really make its move in 2020 and moving forward. And I feel like social media is something, if we are not participating in it with our programs, with our practices, I think we're going to get left in the dust. So again, you have to use it responsibly. I would hardly be the one to advise you on how to use it, but I think having a presence in social media is really important, if for nothing else, to guide people back to what it is that you're trying to enlighten them about, whether it's your podcast, your book, your online platform, your webinars, your evergreens. I think it's important. And you don't have to be an avid poster, but to post once in a while. People are out there. It's another way of linking up. I wanted to say one more thing about it because I think it's interesting how we tell people stay off social media, stay off social media. Judicial officers are also now participating in social media. So all the more reason to be careful about what you post. But all of these side gigs, at least for me, have garnered an additional amount of credibility with the judicial officers before whom I regularly appear. And the message that we're getting out, which is conflict resolution, mental and physical health towards a certain goal, and again, resolution oriented. Judges love that shit, guys. They really do. And it's not untrue. This is what we're trying to bolster. When you appear before that judge in however many days in your other practice, and he or she has seen you and what you're doing as your side gig, most of the time it's going to be something that garners an additional amount of credibility and hopefully respect. So sorry, back to social media. I digress.
No, it's a good point.
No, but I think like social media, I mean, I met Susan on social media. I've gotten advertisers on social media. Like, you know, if you have something to say and you're consistent in your message and you follow the different rules on the different platforms, you can really, you know, I hate to keep saying the term grow your brand, but like you can create the messaging that will alert people to what you want to say. And, you know, it might help with clients, it might help with colleagues. You might just be changing the way somebody's looking at something. And if any of you are listening to this and thinking like, well, I'm pretty happy with the way my practice is right now, but, you know, I have this other dream. I've always wanted to be, you know, a cook, you know, and a keto recipe sharer, like, you know, your side gig can also have nothing to do with your practice, and it can just be a passion, like a pure passion project. There is nothing wrong with that. And Instagram could be a perfectly wonderful place for you to do that. Social media in the world of divorce is and has always been a big no-no. I think, I don't know that I have a chapter on it, but I definitely have at least a page in the book, like stay off social media. And like today, just staying off is not something that most people can do because so much of our lives happens on our phones. And I think, you know, those of us who are, you know, a little bit older have to remember that the next generation of potential clients are living on their phones. So if you want to, you know, maybe not go all tech with your entire practice, you need to at least go somewhat tech so that people will find you. The yellow pages is not the way to go anymore, in case anybody is still there.
That's very true. I had an old law partner who was still paying for Yellow Pages ads, like right up until the time I left the firm, which is only 10 years ago. And I think even Yellow Pages stopped then. But, you know, one of the reasons I started my social media for professionals program is because when I started doing some research on social media, it turned out, I mean, some of the statistics really surprised me. 30% of all time spent online is spent on social media. That's across all age groups. Since COVID, since quarantine, that number's gone up 20%. So right now, especially while we're all confined to our homes, we're staring at these things. And, you know, for professionals, if you're not out there in some way connecting with your external audience and amplifying what you're doing, then you are missing out on a potential ability to connect with people, whether it be clients, whether it be with like-minded, you know, other professionals. You know, Gabrielle and I belong to several groups online that we talk to. I've sourced numerous guests for my podcasts on social media. Yeah. Oh my gosh, the outreach. I get an email a day or instant message or DM every day.
And like, let's say you have a local practice and you're not necessarily looking to get more clients through your local practice, but you love the idea of doing some side gig like we talked about today. You can literally use social media to let people know what you're doing. And that does not mean keep putting a picture of your book or like sales pitches. Like that's like, again, that's like a whole other webinar, but you take the theme of what you're talking about and you share that with your audience, and that will draw them to you. I have gotten probably all of the people who've taken my courses have been people who follow me on Instagram or follow me on LinkedIn. That's how they found me. They are not local. I do not necessarily know them personally, but we have had a relationship that's developed over the course of time where I've been posting and sharing and liking and conversing and actually developing relationships that are real. I happen to be living in a place it's a pretty small town now, and it's really burst my entire world open in a very, very meaningful way. And I never, don't tell my teenagers that I say this, so I'm sure they're never going to watch this, but I'm so grateful for social media because it's just been absolutely fantastic for me. And I just want to say, if any of you are all interested in it, go ahead and take that baby step. And if you need a little bit more support, you can reach out to Susan or to me. We'd be more than happy to, maybe tell you a little bit more. I have to say, just in this moment, I just saw my eldest teenage son's name pop up on the screen. I'm sure he's not watching this, but I'm feeling a little bit like maybe he just heard me say social media was a good thing.
Yeah, social media is no longer just how we stalk our children to find out what they're doing. It's actually a way where we can communicate with the bigger world at large. And I think that is something that takes a little getting used to for professionals, but has become very, very true. So we are coming up on the hour, and So we just have a couple of final thoughts on side gigs, because there's always pros and cons with anything. If you're going to take your valuable time and put that into any one of these endeavors, or all of them as we have, you want to sort of balance the pros and cons. So, Laura, what do you think the downsides have been on the cost side, or just, what it takes to really do these things?
It is a bit of a time suck, and you have to be passionate about it. I, as I said, I've been fortunate on the financial front that there hasn't been too much outlay, but it is time. And for those of us who bill by the hour, every time you're sitting in a doctor's office or waiting for your kid's teacher to come do the parent-teacher conference, you're like, how much is this costing me? How much am I not billing? So certainly when you're on your way to the studio to do your podcast, or you're putting together this deck that Susan did yesterday, it has to be a labor of love. You have to really believe in your message and want to get it out there. That is 100% why I started It's Over Easy, and that is the reason why it doesn't upset me that the time is taken. But you have to be devoted to it, and you have to know that it is going to be a bit of a trade-off. You may not be able to take that mountain bike ride or yoga class if you're working on your side gig, and that has to be okay.
Yeah, I mean, literally when I'm looking at the list of costs here, I'd say for me, time is really the only cost, but yet I'm so obsessed and passionate about the whole idea of helping people become better apart that it doesn't feel like a cost. The thing is, you have to just know your balance. So you're still doing your regular gig. I always call my side gig my secret lover. Like I'm cheating on my law practice with my side gig. Because the creativity it's really fun. I mean, the promotion part, you have to love it. And I absolutely love it. I've had nothing but a positive experience. That doesn't mean that everyone who I reached out to, reached right back out to me, but enough people do. And it just it grows, it snowballs. And, sticking with your vision, the effort, I really think that to do a side gig well, it should actually feel effortless, even though there's a lot of energy expended. Like, it's like, there's nothing I would rather do a lot of the time than work on this. And so I know that it's like the right thing for me. I just feel totally resonant with what I'm doing. So, but you don't need your side gig to take over your life. Like, I let mine take over my life, maybe a little bit too much, but yours could literally be, like I said before, your cooking Instagram channel. Like, it doesn't need to be construction management, 101 webinars. It could be that, but it doesn't have to be that.
Yeah, I mean, for me too, effort and time are the real time sucks or the downsides, but they're so outweighed by the satisfaction and the enjoyment I get from being able to be creative, have some fun. I mean, I truly find my podcast by far the most fun that I have. I love doing the interviews. I love getting to meet new professionals and new colleagues and hear new ideas. Everyone has a story, and that's just fun. The contacts and connections just continue to grow. So there's a lot of benefits that far outweighed for me, for Gab, for Laura, I think, the downside of the side gigs. Now I know I see the lights lighting up down below on the toolbar there. So I just want to say there's contact, and when you get the deck, there's contact information for each one of us in here, a slide with all of our different ways to get in touch with us. And then there's the resources with different things regarding podcasts, publishing, and programs. And we're also all available as well. We'll have the slide decks available on our websites, which are back on those contact pages. And, you'll be able to watch the video again through the ABA. But you ladies ready? You want to answer some questions? Sure. Let's see. Let me just run up. Ladies, would like to view your podcasts. Can you put them in the chat or adjust briefly at the end? Oh, okay. So they are on that one page of the slide deck. Let me just back up the old-fashioned way by clicking. These are the current podcasts or shows that we all have. Mine are Divorce and Beyond and Learn to Mediate. Laura's is All's Fair, and Gabrielle has her YouTube channel of Divorce Talk and more. So you can find all of those. And I think that the information is on them on our slides. Let me just click back.
Yeah, I realize I don't have the YouTube symbol on there, but it is on YouTube. So
here's a good one about podcasting. In a perfect world, who would you want to have in your corner to launch a successful podcast or online training series? An editor, producer, graphic designer, tech person while recording, someone for research, etc. I know which one of those would be the one for me. What about you guys?
Well, again, I could not do our podcast without Johnny. He's the producer, he writes the scripts, and then our sound engineer who kind of edits it and puts it together, Daniel, is amazing. I basically just show up and spew things, and I'm sure they edit it all together and it sounds fine. But yeah, those would be the two I think that are the most important. I think you have to think about what you're good at. Right. If you're good at design or whatever, but I think it's really, and you don't have to be super great at tech. Usually wherever it's being, whatever platform it's on will help with that. But definitely the sound editor, if that's not something that comes naturally to you, and certainly doesn't to most of us, and the producer would be most important for me.
And I would say that like a lot of things, you might have the instinct of wanting to do everything yourself. And the upside of doing things yourself is that you have control of when things go out and what the turnaround time is. But the downside is there's a learning curve for everything. And if you don't love what you're doing and you could be making more money doing your day job, it's oftentimes worth it to contract this stuff out. So you just, to Laura's point, the first thing, although I don't have a podcast for any of these things, I know, like, figure out what you're good at and outsource the other things. And, Susan is, the first thing that came to mind when Susan read the question is who would I want? I want Susan in my corner. I mean,
well, the person I would want is the sound editor, because I can't do that. But here's a little tip, an insider tip, at least from my perspective. I found my editor on Fiverr, Fiverr.com. He charges me, do not quote this, Adam will kill me, $5 an episode. $5 an episode to do my editing. And I can't begin to tell you. And he's wonderful, and he's been with me for 2 years, and he's part of the reason why I could turn out a podcast in 4 days, because I know I can send him disparate, weird, horrible sounding audio, and he can make me sound good. So if I'm doing a podcast, it's all on the side of the editor. Let's see here. Funny, interesting story from your respective book tours, ladies. Nothing funny or interesting happened?
I had when I went, one of my readings at the Barnes and Noble where I grew up, when I went to high school on Staten Island, like everyone who I ever like knew's parents showed up because nobody lives there anymore. And then like my husband and kids were there, and my high school boyfriend and his wife and kids and parents were there. And the other now like 50-year-old man from high school also showed up, and my high school boyfriend was like, what is he here for? And my husband was like, why does he care? So that's, I don't know, that's what happened on my book tour. That was really funny. And like, you know, you can't make that kind of thing up, and you can't anticipate it. I don't know, Laura, you go. I'm sure you have something much cooler than that.
No, I don't. We toured it. I can't think of anything that funny or interesting that happened. And again, it was October 2013. So if there was funny, interesting stuff.
You've raised kids since then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're tired. Those kids take a lot out of us. Absolutely. Right.
I'm just looking through some of the questions here. Let me just make sure I don't want to. Some of these have been answered. I think they were asked during or answered during. I have a question for Laura. How do you think interviewing some of your high profile clients on the podcast helps spread your message of amicable divorce?
Because the way that our society works, for better or for worse, is we all want to emulate famous people. That's why we watch, the shows, whether it's Entertainment Tonight or TMZ Live. We buy the magazines, we click through Daily Mail, whatever it is. And again, maybe we don't want to be like them, but we certainly want to know what's going on with them. If we have celebrities like Gwyneth Paltrow and Chris Martin that are consciously uncoupling, or Jennifer Garner and Ben Affleck that are doing their divorce by virtue of mediation, even, any of them that then come out and say wonderful things about each other. Demi Moore and Bruce Willis are quarantining together with all of their kids, even though he's married to someone else and has kids with her. That has a trickle-down effect on people. And that makes people like you and I go, wow, they can do it. Maybe we'll do it too. Even if we don't say it out loud, subconsciously, those people are the people that we look at and we want to emulate. That's why Us Magazine, I think it is, it has a feature that says stars. They're just like us. And you see somebody putting money in the parking meter or picking up their dog food or whatever it is, taking a big bite of something that's unflattering. We want to relate to them. And so to see that they're doing things in a lovely way makes us act that way as well. I also think there is a certain amount of schadenfreude, which is if somebody rich and famous and beautiful is going through a sad time, our first reaction might be either like, ha ha ha, happiness, or at least curiosity. But the empathy and compassion that most humans have within us makes us also feel like, wow, even that gorgeous fairy tale wedding that we all watched play out on the pages of the magazines and on our laptops and phones, that didn't go right. And so if she or he isn't happy in his or her marriage or relationship, maybe it's okay that I'm not happy either. And maybe I will get through it and maybe I will be okay. So I think it is important to share stories of famous people because I think it also brings around the idea of we're all in this together. That's why I think people are enjoying watching everybody that's in quarantine, although I'm noticing far fewer of them are posting now that their roots have grown out and their eyelashes
or we turn this way.
At the beginning, there was a lot, and now there's like pictures of kids in the pool.
That's hysterical.
So Nelson, one of my friends, hi Nelson, who's out there, he's asking about websites. He's tried doing his own website using WordPress. Gabrielle and I have been having a lot of conversations about websites lately, and he's finding it very frustrating to work with, right, Gabrielle?
Contact me. I'll tell you what to do. Really, I've been cracking the code.
She's been cracking the code, or
I really have been cracking the code on WordPress. And but I know Susan has another experience. She uses GoDaddy.
Yeah, I actually use GoDaddy's website builder, and I do that for all of my podcast or all of my websites. I have 3 separate websites because I'm a control freak and I want my stuff up and up to date and ready to go like when I want it. And I'm the only person who can get it done. There's my control freak nature. But I'm talking to lawyers and mediators. We're all control freaks.
I'm too disorganized, and I think I would make too many mistakes if I were the only person in charge. So I actually like having somebody else sort of managing it, and then I can go in and make date changes and little things like that. Because, you need to know what you're good at. I'm really good at solving really horrible divorce cases. I'm really not that good at necessarily always dotting all my I's and crossing all my T's when I'm, posting something. I know you got to know what you can do and what your bandwidth can handle. But if I can do it, you can do it. And I'm actually doing a lot more myself now on WordPress. That's why I said, I can sort of tell you some ways to navigate that if you're stuck there. Otherwise, just go to GoDaddy. Susan says it's really user-friendly.
Let me just check. I see another chat popped up. If it's a question or it's time, according to Gina. So we are done on time. You can reach out to any of us. Our as I said, our contact information is on those slides. We'll get those posted in just a minute. We, as Laura said, I just finished the slides. But we thank you all for coming. We highly encourage you all to consider a side gig. I think I can speak for at least me. It's the most fun I have in my day, and it's how I met both of these lovely ladies. So get your side gig, people. Larry, you had your hand raised, and I cannot find how to allow you to talk because I can't find you in all of the many participants.
I can help out, Susan.
Oh, thank you.
I can find him.
I couldn't find him either, so if you can find him. Larry had his hand raised.
I have to go alphabetically. Yep. Wait, Larry, you're not in the L's. Where are you?
That's what.
Schooler? Got it? Larry
Schooler.
He wrote no problem.
Oh, okay. All right.
We're not finding you. I'm sorry, Larry. You're not showing up over there in the attendee panel.
Maybe he's
gone
exactly now. He had to go. But
Thank
you, everyone. Again, you can get all the information on the ABA's website. They'll be up shortly. I'm going to send them the slides. Plus, they'll be on all of our websites, and we all have them. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
And as a reminder for attendees, go over and fill out the evaluation.
Please.
Let our presenters know how much you enjoyed this presentation. Thank you, Susan, and all. And Gabrielle, Laura, bye all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Thank you. Thank you,
Bye.
Gina. Bye,
Thank you, Gina.
Thanks, everyone. Great job, ladies. Really great job.
Bye,
Okay,
guys.
bye.
Have a good one. Take care.